Hi everyone, I'm Phoebe. Today I'm going to share a few tips about shading manga art in a way that feels more three-dimensional and less cartoonish. Being cartoonish isn't a bad thing per se, it's just a preference of style to suit the occasion. I'm just going to be sharing some techniques that I use personally to create the effect that I showed on the thumbnail, in 5 main parts of the video. Okay, now that I'm done rambling, let's draw. A commonality that you can see in manga artists is weight in line art. Weight is basically making your lines thicker in places and thinner in other places. This tip is actually much more important than a lot of people think it is. Cartoons are characterized by heavy and equal line weights, so when you want to go for a less flat style, you probably want to do the opposite. Toggling your settings to make your brushes pressure sensitive is a really good start. And if you don't use a drawing pad, you can make it so that your program adjusts line weight according to your drawing speed. I also like filling in some corners just to add a touch more of variety. Here, I quickly did the line art for the same sketch with different brush settings. As you can tell, good line art really makes a huge difference and also makes drawings a lot less stiff. So the next few parts won't really be tips, I'll just be sharing techniques I use to draw different parts of a character. A major line that I like to keep in mind when shading anything this way is to always use a mix of soft and hard shading. That's super important. Okay, so skin. When shading skin, I like to start with hard shading. Something I used to do when shading skin was just to use a really hard and sharp brush to go over the skin shadows in a darker version of the skin tone. That obviously didn't look very good, and it ended up making the characters look kind of gray and dull. What I like to do now is take a pinker or a more saturated color and draw the hard shadows with a watercolor-like brush. I don't know why, but I just love the graphite pencil brush on Ibis Paint X. Then I use the same color to do a light blush over the characters' faces. The intensity and placement of the blush depends on the character's gender and personality. For the core shadows of the skin, I like to use a purplish grayish color and a softer brush for the darkest parts of the skin. They may look burnt at first, but that's mainly because the other areas haven't been shaded yet, and you can always adjust the opacity and saturation to your own taste. Hair is shiny, so I like to shade it like a bent piece of metal. That may sound weird, but hear me out. When you bend a piece of metal, there's a top half and a bottom half. The bottom part will be darker, and the top part of the bottom half will be darkest at the bend. The light will be reflected at the top half closest to the bend. All that stuff sounds complicated, but it's pretty simple in practice. To shade hair, I just do what I described, but instead with long brush strokes that follow the hair's flow. This way, the hair has volume and looks like it's actually curving or flowing in a three-dimensional space, as opposed to shading it how I did in the original version of my profile picture. Using different blending modes for the layers of shading can really make the hair in your picture stand out and draw attention to your character, especially if you use add for highlight layers and multiply for the shadow layers. Clothes are tricky. Shading clothes is also really tricky to give tips on just because clothes are so unpredictable and there are so many types of them. My best advice for this problem is to find pictures of the clothing material you're trying to draw and figure out whether lighting is needed and where to put the creases. For now though, I'll just stick to basic tips that should be applicable to most of the clothes you draw. I like to choose a color that differs slightly in saturation or hue to the base color, make 2 separate layers and set both on multiply. Remember that clothes have a lot less soft shading than skin because it's a harder texture with more folds, but soft shading is still necessary. For the first layer on the bottom, just fill in cast shadows caused by the creases in the clothes. and also draw places that are naturally darker because they're being blocked by things like hair or the arms. In order to get a nice blend between soft and hard shading, I just use a watercolor brush for hard shading and the smudge and fade pen, also known as the water tool in other programs. For the second layer, use a slightly different, less saturated color and a thinner brush to emphasize the core shadows of the clothes. The eyes are always my favorite part to shade in a drawing because they really make the whole canvas come alive for the characters. I think that to understand how to shade a detailed anime or manga eye, just start with the basic core structure, usually two halves, a pupil, and lighting on the top and bottom. Once you have that down, you can add all the details you feel are necessary while maintaining the original structure. For me, I like to add a darker edge around the whole eye and two triangles to close it in, as well as using the top half's color to complete a little ring on the bottom. For the lighting, drawing little flashes of light around the eye feels a lot more intricate than just drawing a huge lamp on the top. As with everything else, make sure you use your own creative liberty when drawing eyes, but try to have a consistent core structure that doesn't necessarily have to be the same as mine. As I mentioned in this video, blending layers really do help a lot in shading and lighting. Okay, so that's all I'm going to cover on making your manga art seem less cartoonish. Since you've basically watched the whole video, I hope that you've at least found one or two things that you would like to use or be inspired by. Honestly, I think that finding your own shading techniques is a process formed through experimentation and practice, and I really hope that this video aided you on that journey. Goodbye for now, and thanks so much for watching.